Today's daf is Ayin Aleph. We just have a little bit more on daf Ayin Amid Beis to fill in. Omar Rabbi Ovin Bar Rav Ada Omar Rav. This is, I would say, about 10 lines up from the bottom. Kol Anosa Isha Sheino Genislo. He marries a woman that he's not allowed to marry. He causes for himself Shakodesh Baruch Hu Mashresh Chinoso, when ultimately Hashem will come to redeem the people of Israel, and he will abide in our midst. Meid al kol hashvatim, he will testify on behalf of everyone that they're all his, with a capital H. V'ein meid al, but he will not testify on behalf of this person who married a woman that's psula. Shenemar, as it says in Tilim, Shiftei Ka, Edus Yisrael, what means that God is made on behalf of Klal Yisrael, that they are his. Emasai Havi Edus Yisrael, Bisman Shashvatim Shiftei Ka, when they are Miuchadim Lo, when they marry the right proper marriage partner. Omer Rab Chia, Omer Rab Chama, Rab Chaninik Shekadosh Baruch Hu Masher Shchinoso Eino Masher El Al Mishpachos Miuchasos Shev Yisrael Shenemar Va'esahi Niyum Hashem Eyeh Lelokim Lechol Mishpachos Yisrael. And the question is, it says Lechol Yisrael. It says Lechol Mishpachos Yisrael. It doesn't say Lechol Yisrael Onemar. Lechol Mishpachos Yisrael, to teach us that Ein hashos hashchina el mishpachos hamiyuchasos haksheris b'Yisrael. The next part of that same pasuk from Yirmiyahu Hanavi Perek Lam, it says, "Vehema yu lili am Omer Rabba bar Rav Huna zo maila yisera sheyesh bein Yisrael legerim." So now Rabba is comparing those who are born Jewish to those who convert to Judaism. Tilu b'Yisrael ksib behu, vayisi lahem lelokim, and then vehema yu lili am. In other words, they're not yet mine, and yet I will be theirs. I will be their God, even though they have not yet accepted me. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Masher Shechina on them, even though they are not behaving like his nation. And God has a, shall we say, a vision that if he brings us close, then we'll eventually do tshuva. But ve'ilu b'gerim ksiv, in that same Sefer Yirmiyahu, one chapter earlier, it says, Mihu zeh arev es libo lageshes elai nium Hashem. Li la'am, and then v'anochi yeh lachem le'elokim. So this pasuk means that first the Gerim have to uphold the law of Hashem. They have to mend their ways, and then, and only then, God will be their king. Rabbi Chelbo Koshim Gerim L'Yisrael Ksapachas. Sapachas, which is a type of nega, of tzaras, and gerim are difficult to Yisrael. In other words, they don't live up to the commitment. Shenemar, as the pasuk says in Yeshayahu Hanavi, v'nilva hager aleim v'nispechu al beis Yaakov. Okay, so we're talking about a ger and v'nispechu. Ksiv hacha in this pasuk, as far as gerim, it says v'nispechu. Ksiv hasam in the Parsha of Negoim, v'yikra Yudalit, it says l'seis v'sapachas. So the pasuk is comparing gerim to the negav tzapachas, because gerim often, not always, but over the course of time, they're not careful about mitzvahs, and the Jewish people around them in the same society are influenced negatively by these gerim who are not up to par, so to speak. Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina, Shakadosh Baruch Hu. Here we're going to start today's daf. Ayin Aleph. Mitayr Shvatim. La'asid Lavo, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be Mitayr the Yichusim of the Yuchsin of the Shvatim. He's going to be Mafresh the Psulim from the mixture with the Ksherim. Shivto Shalev Mitayr. He's going to first start the process by purifying the Shevet Levi. Now here, the Radak, in his commentary on a Pasuk in Malachi, says that this is a reference to the Kohanim who come from Shevet Levi. Hashem will begin with the Kohanim. That's the process of Tara. Shenemar v'yoshev mitzaref u'mitar kesef. There's a certain malach who's sent to separate the psulim from the ksherim. V'tiras b'nei Levi. First, he's going to begin the process of Tara from the b'nei Levi and take out the psulim from b'nei Levi. The zikak osam, he'll purify them kizav v'kakosef. And we know that these are metals that in their natural state, they need purification. There are admixtures of psoles that have to be removed. And that's exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do. And he starts with the Kohanim. In the note here, he quotes a medrash that in the name of the Eitz Yosef, that the Mila of Kohanim is beyond that of the rest, the balance of Klal Yisrael, and therefore their Tara comes first. Rabbi Shimon Levi, Kesef Mitar Mamzerim. Strange statement. What does it mean that the Kesef of Mamzerim, and it has to do with the wealthy Mamzerim, that Mishpachos Ksher Yisrael are attracted to marry into Mamzerim because of the money that they're going to get. They sort of like bribe their way into these marriages. And somehow that very money that was used to attract Mishpachos Ksher Yisrael to marry into Gerim, that's going to cause, paradoxically, the hechsher of Mamzerim. And why is that? Because in the future days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not be mafresh the psulim that were nis'ari b'ksherim. He's going to allow it to continue as is. And here he says that Al Yidei Shal Mamzer Yikna Lo B'Kaspo Shivcha V'Ben Sheivolid Mimenu Yishacharu. So this takes us back to Rabbi Tarfon, that the Mamzer could buy for himself with his money a Shivcha, and then the son that's born to the Shivcha is an Eved, and then he goes ahead and he's Meshachar the Eved, and that's going to be Mitayr the Mamzer. Shenemar v'yoshav mitzaref u'mitayr kesef. There'll be Mitayr and Machshir the Psulim that got mixed up into the Shvatim, the Ksherim v'Yisrael, as a result of their money. And the pasuk continues by saying, Magishe mincha b'tzedakah, my Magishe mincha b'tzedakah, Rabbi Yitzchak, tzedakah asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu im Yisrael. God does a chesed with Klal Yisrael. Shemishpacha shenitma. Once a mishpacha psul got mixed up in Klal Yisrael, then nitma. Nitma means it remains in that mixture and it becomes kosher. Kufa. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul Kol HaRatzos. This is a brisa that was brought back on Daf Samach Tesamid Beis. Ki Isa le'Eretz Yisrael. So it means that Eretz Yisrael, in comparison to the other countries, with the exception of Bavel, is already somewhat cleaned out, so to speak. The Tarovas of Psulim has already been diminished. So whereas in other Artzol Sheba Olam, there is a, shall we say, a serious mixture of psulim, that's considered a suffix psula yichus vis-a-vis Eretz Yisrael, because in Eretz Yisrael, by consciousness, Sanhedrin is situated in the Lishkas HaGozos, and they're constantly being bodek yuchsin. So Eretz Yisrael is an improvement on the other arotzos. However, there's still psulim mixed into Eretz Yisrael, Mishpachas Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Eretz Yisrael ke'isa leBavel. If you compare Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, then Eretz Yisrael has a greater number of tarobes of psulim, and those were the psulim that we spoke about yesterday in terms of Ezra, who took the psulim out of Bavel, and he cleaned out Bavel of the psulim, and he took them on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So the suffix psulim in Yichus, in Eretz Yisrael, with regard, if in comparison to Bnei Bavel, is that of an Isa. Isa is a mixture. And this is because Ezra took off the psulim, separated the psulim from the ksherim in Bavel, and left Bavel Nakia. The Gemara quotes, Bimei Rebbe Bikshu Lasos Bavel Ke'isa Eretz Yisrael. At the time of Rebbe, they wanted to be Kovea, the opposite, that Bavel should be considered a mixture of psulim vis-a-vis Eretz Yisrael, meaning that in Eretz Yisrael, anyone who wants to marry a woman from a family of Bavel, he's going to have to be bodek their yichus. And the reason for that is that from the time that Ezra made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, many days had passed, and they hadn't been bodek the yichus of the Babylonians. And now there was a chash with the passage of time that a lot of psulim got mixed up to the mishpachos ksheris to Yisrael in Bavel. Amalehem, Rebbe rejected this. Kotzim atem masimim li beinenai. You are putting thorns in between my eyes by establishing that the Bavliim are not muchzakim b'toras kashrus, and therefore requiring bedika with regard to mishpachas Bavliim. Ritzonchem, if you want to go ahead and make such a kviyah, yitofel imoyim, Rabbi Chanina ben Chama. Why don't you first discuss this with Rabbi Chanina ben Chama, and he will counter-argue against you. V'nitfal imoyim Rabbi Chanina ben Chama, and that's exactly what they did. V'yomer lehem, and he taught them, Kach mekublani, mi Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, Shomer Mishum Aviv, in the name of Rabbi Yossi's father, Kol HaRotzos Isa LeEretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael Isa LeBavel. So it means that in Bavel, the Mishpachos HaMiyuchasos, they don't require Bedika. In another period of time, Vimei Rabbi Pinchas, Bikshu Lasos Bavel Ke Isa LeEretz Yisrael. Again, there was another attempt during the time period of Rabbi Pinchas to say that so much time had passed since Ezra's Aliyah to Bavel, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, that once again Bavel started getting mixed up with Psulim. So when Rabbi Pinchas wanted to go up to the Beis HaMedrash and he wanted to reject them, they were afraid that he might darshan and prove his sheet against them, and he might reveal the Psulim in Eretz Yisrael. He spoke and he addressed himself to his avodim. Shani Omer Shnei Dvarim beBeis HaMedrash. When I will say two things, which we'll get to later in the Beis HaMedrash, Toluni be'arisa verutze. Put me into a wagon and skirt me off from the Beis Medrash, because if the Talmidim will get a hold of me, they're going to really pounce on me. And he was an older man. He couldn't run. Ki ayil, when Rabbi Pinchas came into the Beis Medrash, Amalahem, this is the first of two dinim, Ein shchita la'of min Torah. meaning minat Torah, oaf does not need shchita in order to be materit fachila. It's enough that the oaf is dead and it's no longer ever been a chai. And the Gemara Chulin on Daf Chavav Amid Beis derives this from the pasuk Ish Mibnei Yisrael Asher Yatzur Tzayid Chaya O Of Asher Yocha V'Shavchas Dama. Gemara says B'Shvicha B'Alma Sag. The Gemara in the Maskana there in Chulin says Zudas Rabbi Lezer Hakapar Avodas Rebbe Yesh Shchita Lof Minat Torah. So now, when Rabbi Pinchas is giving this drasha, he knows that the students will be so, in Yiddish we say orangutan, so preoccupied studying this halacha that he's going to squeeze in a second halacha, adi yasvei v'kamayni ba, while they're preoccupied with this halacha about the fact that an oath does not need shchita. He tried to push in a second halacha. And immediately the Avodim Natlu, they took him by Risa, they put him into this wagon, Viratzu, and just as he had demanded of them, they ran away with him. Ratzu Akravat Talmidim. Talmidim were running after him so that he would reveal who are the Psulim in Eretz Yisrael. Lo higiu, and they couldn't catch up to it. Therefore, Yashvu Ubad, the Talmidim themselves sat and they tried to check out the Mishpachos Eretz Yisrael to try to clarify who are the Psulim. Ad shehigiu l'sakana, until it got very dangerous because the powerful members of Klal Yisrael, who realized that they were now coming to passel them, would threaten their lives, who pirshu, and they left it alone without a b'dika. They stopped dead in their tracks before they would be dead in their tracks. Omer Rav Yochanan take a shvua heichol with the heichol of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'yadenu he, I have the ability to reveal who are the mishpachos psulos in Eretz Yisrael. Aval ma eseh, how can I do it? Shrei gedoli ador nitma uba, that even amongst the gedoli Hadar, there are they come from families where there's an admixture of psul. Several lay law to Rabbi Yitzchak, and the Gemara explains that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak, mishpacha shenitma nitma. Once a mishpacha psulin becomes me'urav with ksherim nitma, it remains mu'reves, and we don't reveal who are the psulin. We leave it besafek, and li'asid lava, they would be ksherim. Omar Abai Afanan Nami Tnina, I also have a mission in Edios Perches to support Rabbi Yitzchak that we don't separate the psulim that got mixed up, but leave it as it is, besafek, and in the future they will become ksherim. And the Mishnah says the following: Mishpachas Beis Atzrifa Hoysa Be'ever Yarden. There was a mishpacha kshera. Tzrifa means kshera. V'richaka ben Sion bizroa. And ben Sion, who is an ish chashav, Rashi calls him an ish zroa, a powerful individual, he declared that mishpacha was a mishpacha psula. The Od, and another mishpacha cheres hoisa, and this happened in Ever Yarden as well. That was psula v'kerva ben Sion v'zroa, and ben Zroa, who was such a powerful individual, announced and proclaimed that they were ksherim, even though they were psula. And the Mishnah continues that kigon elu mishpachos like that, who are ksheros or psulos, and it was well known. And they were nisrachaku or niskarvu bizroa, is in the future losid lava eliyo bo letami letara lerachik ulekar. Eliyo will be marchik the mishpachos Kigon elu diyadim, like those mishpachos that we have a chazak that psulim, and he will be makarev those who were ksheros. Our mishpachos nitma, if the mishpachos were totally mixed together, and we cannot determine who are the psulos, then nitma Elio Hanavi will leave them in the kashrus state. Tana, we learned in a brisa. Od acheres, another mishpacha was in Ever Yarden. In addition to the mishpacha that we mentioned before, the mishpacha psula. V'lo ratzu chacham lagalos. The chachamim were inhibited about revealing to others who was this mishpacha psula. Why? Because they were already ma'uravim b'ksherim. Once every 7 years, they would transmit this secret about that mishpacha. Others have a girsa that it was pamayim b'shvua twice every 7 years, in order to guarantee that lo yishtaka psula, that there should be a tradition about the psul in that mishpacha, and they should be careful not to be married into that mishpacha. Livrosh mimeh. That would make sense if we interpret it as Pamachas b'Shavua, once in every 7 days. Kedesanya, like we learned in the Brisa, Reni Nazir imlo agala mishpachos, yeh Nazir v'lo yigalech, lo yigala some mishpachos. An individual took upon himself Nazirus, who's Makabel Nazirus, if he will not reveal the psulos. And the Brisa establishes, let him be a Nazir without fulfilling that Tanai, and lo yigalas hamishpachos. So we see that it's not appropriate to be megal the psulim. And even the chachamim that required to reveal the psulim to their talmidim, we don't do it more than once every 7 years. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Shem, the holy name of God, which is called Havaya, ben Arba Osios. Chachamim Osrim Oso Talmideim. That shame of Yud Kei Vav Kei, there's permission for the Rebbeim to teach the Talmidim how to read it and how to write it and what it means. How often can they do so? To transmit the secret of Yud Kei Vav Kei to their Talmidim, Pamachas B'Shvua, once every 7 years. Amri love others say Pamayim B'Shvua, twice every 7 years. Amar Nachbar Yitzchak Mustabra Kamandion Pamachas B'Shvua, that they should not reveal the meaning of Yud Kei Vav Kei more frequently than once in 7 years. The Chsiv, based on a pasuk in the Parsha of the Sneh in Shmos Perek Gimel, with regard to the shame of Hashem, it says, Ko Somar El Bnei Yisrael Zesh Mi Olam. And it doesn't say L'olam with a Vav, but rather L'olam Ksiv, which means Le'alem. Le'alem means to keep it secret. So this name of Hashem is meant to be kept secret. Therefore, we don't transmit its meaning to the Talmidim more frequently once in 7 years. Rava Sarah L'midrashe B'Perka. Rava thought that he would give a public lecture, and in that drush, in the front of the tzibur, he would reveal the kriya and the way to interpret the name Havaya. Amalei Saba, one elderly gentleman, says, La li alem ksiv, we are required to conceal the meaning of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Tosfos in Masechet Chulin says that Ahu Saba means Elio Hanavi. Rabbi Avina Rami, following stira, Ksiv, it says, Zesh mi liolam, Uksiv, Zez zichri lidar vadar. So what's the difference now between Zesh mi and Zez zichri? In fact, leave out the second Zeh, and the Torah could have written Zesh mi v'zichri. And we have understood that in that Shem Miyuchad, that holy ineffable name of God, it's referring to that Shem. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo kshani nichtav ani nikra nichtav ani biyud k. I'm written yud hey vav hey, right? And the nikra be aleph dal. We read it as adnos. So the extra vizel over here, zez zichri, is in contrast to the zeshmi, which is the way that it's written. Toner Rabbanim Rishonim originally Shem ben Shtei Mesrei Osios Ayu Mosrin Osel Chol Adam. There was a name of Hashem that had 12 letters. And Rashi says, Lo Pirshu Lana. We don't know what this name is that has 12 letters. The Yad Ramah writes that it's a tziruf of Havaya times 3, that we take the name Yud K Vav K, multiply it with another 2, and we mix it all together, and you get 3 times 4, which is 12. And anyone could be taught the meaning of the name of 12 letters. However, there were those who were using the name for other purposes, not fatzos nefashos. They allowed only teaching the Kohanim Anovim, the humble Kohanim, that they should remember when they deliver the bracha in the Beis Hamikdash, Birchas Kohanim, after the Akrovas Atom Shel Shachar, they should know the meaning of the Shem ben Yud Beis Osios. Vatznum shebekuna mavliim oso b'ne'im achayim hakohanim. And the super duper pious Kohanim, instead of verbally mentioning the name of Yud Beis Osios, what they would do is they would quickly mention the name Bavla. Bavla means as they sort of swallowed it, while the other Kohanim were raising their beautiful voices when they gave the bracha with the shame of Arba Osios. And this way, the shame of Yud Beis Osios was never publicly heard. B'tanya, we learned to the Bryce from Rabbi Tarf. Ba'amachas halisi achar achi imi, the brother of my mother, and he was a Kohen. So this is my uncle through my mother, Laduch, and I went up to deliver the Birchas Kohanim, v'teisi ozni etzel Kohen Gadol, and I was able to lean over and hear what the Kohen Gadol was saying. V'shamati shevlia shem b'ne'im asech v'kohanim, and he was reciting the name of Hashem of 12 letters, and it was sort of drowned out by the song and the voices and the bracha kohen. There's a name of Hashem that has 42 letters. And there are many different opinions amongst the Rishonim about the name of 42 letters. Once again, Rashi says, Lo Piresh Lanu. We don't know what that name is. Yad Ramah and Tosfos write that this was the shame of Hashem that comes from Bereshis until the hay of Uvo. Notice if you count from the word Bereshis until the hay, which is the third letter of Uvohu, you will arrive at the number 42 letters. The Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim writes that this name is not one continuous word, but rather it's many, many different smaller words. And if you add them all together, you will come to 42 letters. The Rashba writes that there are countries, Shesham Shem Zen Nikra Bi Arbasre Milim, Kol Milabas Shalosh Osios. In any event, Ein Mosrin Osa Levishat Sanua V'Onov. We don't just publicly share the meaning of the name of God of 42 letters called the Tetragrammaton. V'Omed B'Chatzi Yomov. And there's no chashash that a tzanua v'anav would misuse the shame of 42 letters and start causing, by using that name, causing havoc amongst the creatures. Who is it that would never use the name of 42 letters to take revenge against someone who did him wrong? That's a Kohen who's Tsanua, Anav. He's 35 years old. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get drunk. And he's not Omer al Midosa to take revenge with anger. V'chol yodo, anyone who knows the secret of the name of God of 42 letters, Vazarbo, and he's very careful not to reveal its meaning to anyone else. V'amishamro, Vitara, and he's very careful about using the name of 42 letters in purity. Ohuv l'mayla v'nechmed l'mat. He's beloved up in the higher spheres because he's Machabed Hashem. And down here on this earth, he will prevent any sort of hezek that could come down in this world by carefully watching, supervising over the name. They masu mitel salabrios, and people are afraid of him because they know that he has the potential of using the shame of Ben Arbon v'shtayim osios v'nochel l'shnei olamim will be zochel l'mazen olam haba. Amar Shmuel mishmei desav. Shmuel said in the name of an elderly Tana, there are 3 levels in Yuchsa. The highest level is a mishpach mi Bavel. Why? Because a family from Bavel is bechezkas kshero medis. You don't have to be choshesh that there's a tarovas of psul. Unless you know, so it's innocent until proven guilty. And then we get to shararotzes. This is the other extreme. Bechezkas posel heim ombus. We assume that until proven innocent, they are guilty with the tarovas of psulim, and we don't marry them until it becomes absolutely clear that there's no psul kol. And in the middle between the 2 polar extremes is Eretz Yisrael, muchzak l'psul pasul, muchzak kosh kosh. It all depends on whether there's a chazaka on such and such a family that's pasul, or on the contrary, there's a chazaka on such and such a family that's kosher. Gemara asks the following kasha, gufa kasha. What you write about Eretz Yisrael is a stira, an inner contradiction, because Amarta muksal psul psul, that only if there's a chazaka that there's a psul in this family, then the family is possible. Hastam, if we know nothing, we don't have neither a cheskas kashus nor a cheskas psul, is kasha. Hadar tani muksal kasha kasha. We only are maksab ksheris if we know for sure that there's a mishpacha kshera. Hastam, the implication if we don't know, then possible. We can reconcile this contradiction